Probably born in the wrong country at the wrong time. The way the game's played in this country now, with the foreign influence of players and managers coming, it would suit me down to the ground. What he hasn't got in an England shirt yet is, I don't think he's got quite the approval yet. When he gets the approval, like he has at Tottenham, when he does get that, he'll
approval from the fans or the management?
Management. Yeah, but if that's how David perceives it or his family perceives it, I can't stop that. But throwing him under the bus? No way. I actually protected him in more ways than he probably knows, actually.
Hello, I'm Jeff Stelling and this is Football's Greatest. Each week I'll be sitting down with a legend to discuss and debate some of the best exponents of the beautiful game. The players that got you off your seat, the hard men that made you wince, and the moments that will stay with you for life. Today, we're going to talk about great midfielders with a man who's definitely amongst the best there's been. Brilliant vision, wonderful touch and a scorer of great goals. He could even sing. Welcome, Glenn Hoddle.
Sing a bit.
Who had the better voice then, you or Chris Waddle?
Oh, without a doubt, me.
So people who don't realise, you had a big hit single, didn't you, with Diamond Lights?
We did, actually, Jeff. Yeah, 1987. Yeah, both of us playing with the old mullets. And, yeah, we had some fun doing that. It really was. I've always loved singing. I've always loved music. I'm music mad. I don't think I've ever heard an engine of a car I've ever had, because as soon as I get in, that music's on and it's loud. It's brilliant. So, yeah, but we had some lovely fun. Bit of fun.
Just before we get stuck into things, I should ask you, how's your health?
Yeah.
Now, because you had that, well, I was going to say a scare, it was more than a scare, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
You know, at the TV studios.
Yeah, no, very, very good, actually. Just take a few pills in the morning and in the evening to keep me ticking over, I presume. But no, I was such a lucky man. I really had to be here. To have a cardiac arrest is a massive thing. You've got 3 minutes for somebody to do CPR on you or get a defibrillator. And Simon Daniels, bless him, was the sound manager at the BT studios at the time. Saved my life. That's the reason I'm sitting here. So I owe him my life, and obviously the surgeons, what I had to have done and whatever. But no, just feeling really strong, really good, and still playing my golf, which is the main thing at the moment. But no, loving life at the moment.
Well, look, we're going to talk about other midfielders in a minute, but I want to talk a bit about you first of all, because Arsene Wenger once called you the most skillful player he'd ever coached, which is fantastic. Do you think that you were ahead of your time?
Yes, yeah. If I'm honest, I couldn't say it when I was playing, because 53 caps for England. I've got every one of them. I'm pride, playing for your country. Probably born in the wrong country at the wrong time. The way the game's played in this country now, with the foreign influence of players and managers coming, it would suit me down to the ground. But we played in an era of creative players. It was very tough for us to be strong, and you had to be mentally strong to stick to your guns and play like we did, because of the style of play that we had. The ball was in the air, the pitches were poor, obviously. It was physical. So if you got the ball down and tried to caress it and tried to play positively in a creative way, you had someone that was going to try and take you out of the game, literally. So it was tougher. It was tougher. So to play now in this era would have been fascinating. It would have been lovely. I'd have enjoyed playing on them pitches. But I enjoyed it anyway. Of course, you know, I think we're such a small percentage of people, professional footballers, but we're so privileged. We're so privileged, and I've always been grateful to be able to kick a ball and play football for your career, for your job. And for me, it's always been a labour of love, really. I've loved football since I was a kid. It's almost, as I say in my book, it's in my DNA. It was in my DNA as a kid. It chose me. I didn't choose football. Football chose me, so I've loved it ever since.
Just before we get to talk about, you know, sort of players who inspired you and role models, just want to ask you a personal question. Do you feel that through your life sometimes you've been, not as a footballer, but as a person, misunderstood? You know, because I look at some of the... I go back to a time when we were covering Champions League, and one evening we sat outside a brasserie that was closing after the game, had a couple of beers and we're eating some crisps or snacks or whatever, and you're telling some football stories, and I just thought, what a great bloke, you know, you'd want to spend time with him. And then you read stories of negativity. I don't know whether it touches on your faith or the fact that the rumour that when you were a coach you found it difficult because players weren't as good as you. Just negative stories, and I just wonder whether you felt overall you were misunderstood.
Yeah, to a degree I was, but I mean a lot of the stuff that comes out on a personal level doesn't affect me at all. Certainly doesn't after 5 years of having a cardiac arrest, dying for 8 minutes. That's not a problem to me at all, and it never really has. But on a football front, I think I was ahead of my time as a player, and I think I was ahead of time as a manager. The things I was bringing in, the way I thought about the game, the way my first manager job was at Swindon, and straight away we played 3 at the back. It was as if like the wheel's been reinvented, sort of nowadays. It does make me smile, a few years back. Oh, they're playing with 3 at the back. That's what we did when I first went into manager. It was different. I was different as a player, and I think I was different as a manager. And you can't get every decision right as a manager. Of course you can't. As a player, you can't. But I knew I was true to myself, and but I don't think I've gone through an era where I don't think people understood me in that sense. Now would be a different story. Completely different story. I look at that now. But I had wonderful times as a player and a manager. I loved every minute of it, and wouldn't change it for the earth. But misunderstood, yeah, as a footballer, definitely. As a person, people don't know you. You ain't worried about people that don't. They might make up stories about it that are not true. A lot of them are not true. But at the end of the day, in football, if you're putting your head above the parapet and you're going to be a manager or you're a footballer, you're going to get judged. You're going to get judged for X, Y, Z or whatever, and there's a tribal, certain fans and journalists maybe have got a certain look at certain clubs and whatever. Jealousy comes into it. Not being funny, a lot of journalists want to be footballers and they can't. Not just with me, I'm talking about over the years. I'm sure that comes into it as well. And the club they support and they love. All them things come in, but it never really bothered me because I know the person who I am. My family and my friends know. There's the main people in my life, really, that's important. What happens outside is you cannot control that, and you hear people say that, but it's true. The key to it is don't let it worry you, don't let it have an effect on you. I know the person that I am within myself. I found myself many years ago, if you like, within myself, and that's come even more since what happened to me 5 years ago. The things that are happening to me in my life are quite incredible on a spiritual level, but that's for me, that's my faith, that's my belief, that's me as a person. But as a footballer, yes, I was misunderstood. And I think I was ahead of my time. And I think I was ahead of my time in football terms.
Now, thanks for watching Football's Greatest on YouTube. But can I ask you please to hit that subscribe button? That way you won't miss any of our future episodes. And we have some great guests coming up on the show. Who were you when you were first at Tottenham? Who were the people who inspired you, the people you looked up to?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a strange one, actually, because I think back when I was 8 years of age, dad took me to my first game at White Hart Lane. And although I was Spurs mad, and Jimmy Greaves and people like Martin Chivers were playing in that era, and Jimmy was special, but the 2 players were Man United players. Obviously, they won. I was Man United fan for a day when they won in '68.
Yes,
in the European Cup at Wembley. Best was everyone wanted to be George Best.
Yeah,
Bestie was fantastic. But the player, when I look back, and they had more influence on me in a way, subconsciously probably, and the one that I really admired was Bobby Charlton. Bobby had 2 feet, left and right foot. Midfield, scored goals from distance, which I always did. I didn't score many in England. I did in France, but in the box. But so I think his body swerve. I remember going out in the garden in '66, and I think it was the mum's washing pole, the laundry pole in the garden. I dropped my shoulder like Bobby did, both ways, and hit shots against the garage door, things like that. So I think the influence, probably Bobby Charlton had a massive influence on me, and he was a wonderful, wonderful player.
Yeah, he was. There's nothing he couldn't do. He scores goals from distance. I think, we've talked a bit before about it. And Bobby could side foot the ball. Yeah, harder than most people could volley it. Yeah, things like that. And obviously a great man as well. And I know you were ahead of your time. I think everybody would agree with that. But actually, in some respects, you played at a great time for Spurs, didn't you?
Yeah,
because you played with a a couple of fellas, I was going to say a couple of little fellas, one little fella and one rather bigger fella who came over from Argentina, which sort of broke all the norms, really.
Yeah, it was such a shock to see them come. They just won the World Cup. It wasn't as easy at the beginning for me, if I'm honest. I got in the team when I was 17, which is young. You're still learning your trade. You ain't got a clue really about the game. You're learning on the job to a certain degree, and it was tough years. Spurs, we weren't doing great things. We got relegated, and we came back up, and that was the shock of Ossie and Ricky had just won the World Cup in '78. We'd just got promoted back into the first division, and suddenly I remember the news. It came up on the news, and I nearly fell off my sofa. It was like, no, this can't be true. Watching them in the World Cup, and Ossie was such a unique player, actually. He had little number 1 on his shorts, if you remember, Ardiles, because it was alphabetically. He was like a whippet on the football field. He covered the ground so quick. And I remember Ricky coming on against Peru, I think it was, second half, and this big fella with a beard. And I remember saying to my dad, Dad, look at the size of this fella. Look how skillful he is. Look how good he was going past people. And then I'm sitting there thinking, a month later, they're going to be my teammates. It was quite incredible, really. And it was such an exciting time for the club and, for them two to come and to settle them in. All the rest of the players were so excited. It was like, it was like Christmas Eve, when the day that we knew they were coming to the ground.
Because I think people have got to understand, this was so far from the norm in those days. There were no foreign players around.
I don't even think there was one, was there?
No, there'd been a law, hadn't there? I think it only changed when we joined the Common Mark of the EU or whatever it was. That you had to have 2 years residency before you could stay and play here. So that rule had been changed, and then Ossie Ardiles and Ricky Villa come in.
It was amazing, and it didn't click straight away. It clicked with me because I knew playing and training with them, I was on the same wavelength with them, and they were on the same. We didn't speak the languages, but we were. When the ball came out, we had the same language, and it was wonderful. As a young player coming in, and that's no disrespect to the other players that I played with in midfield actually then, but these were on the same wavelength, and it improved me as a player, and I enjoyed my football even more. And they wanted it on the deck, and they wanted to play through the pitch, and
this was exotic stuff, wasn't it?
Exactly, on dodgy pitches, but and rules that were, and they found it hard to adjust at the beginning, particularly Ricky. And we didn't gel as a team really until we had the great midfield, but I don't know how it works sometimes. We all had to work hard, we're all creative players. But until Crooks and Archibald came up front, and Mark Falco was a great, I always say about Mark, because he came in and played 2 or 3 games, and he could keep the level really high for a short period of time, and then they'd come back in, and then Mark would do his job, big job. So we had suddenly a forward line that could actually put the ball in the back of the net after what we created. Because at the beginning, it didn't work. We got thumped 7 at Anfield against Liverpool, a very good Liverpool side. We got some thumpings. It wasn't all hunky-dory at the beginning, but during the 80s, when we started to just get the strikers right and everything fell into place, it was a team that was lovely to play in. It was lovely to play in that team, and going into games we would almost feel, even if we weren't going to play that well, we would win. And that's a wonderful feeling to have, as a set of players and a manager who had that feeling, and fans. And that's what you get when you have that momentum in a club. We'd gone through hard times for 3 years. It wasn't like that in the late 70s. But in the 80s, it was like, wow, we've got a team. We know we're good. We're going to put fear into our opponents as well. They're going to have to try and stop us, not the other way round. And then Keith allowed us to go and play. And it was a very, very enjoyable time in that period of time through the 80s.
And obviously everybody will talk about the 1981 FA Cup final, the 100th FA Cup final, which I'm not sure how many people will remember the first game, to be brutally honest, but they'll all remember the second game.
Yeah, it was an incredible game of football. Yeah. I mean, the first game, someone said we knew we didn't play as well as we could have done, but Joe Corrigan, their goalkeeper, still got man of the match, so it couldn't have been too bad on the Saturday. But the replay was just a classic game of football, in the sense of we go 1-0 up, we go 2-1 down, and we win 3-2. I mean, you couldn't plan it any better as a cup final. And Ricky's goal, the third goal, is you know, it's the slalom goal, as I call it. And I remember screaming at him about 4 times to hit it, Ricky. And he didn't. He cut back in again, and eventually he got the goal, and we saw the game out. But as a Spurs fan at 8 years of age, and the club had gone through those, it was the League Cup and the UEFA Cup back in the 70s, and I was a fan, and I was an apprentice when we hadn't had success for some time. So to walk up them stairs as a Spurs fan from 8 years of age to lift that FA Cup, which meant a hell of a lot back then. Don't care what people say. You know, it meant a hell of a lot. It was almost as big as winning the league. It was the one live game on television. It was massive. And to actually dream about doing it and then doing it for my club, it was a wonderful, wonderful feeling. It really was.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the players that you played against. And I'm going to start with Johan Cruyff. So in the list of greats, where would he stand?
Oh, in my opinion, he is right up. I think I'd put him probably just behind, for me, Maradona, Messi and Pelé. Probably they're the 3 real top icons. And Johan would be just beyond. It's tough to say just behind them, but he was that good. I mean, when you've got a skill named after you in world football, and you got a little kid on the, on a 10-year. I watch my grandson now on a Saturdays, or go training on a Thursday, and you hear the coaches say, "Oh, you could have Cruyffed him," and he's only 7, and they know the Cruyff skill. So to have a skill named after you, that you got to be special, ain't you, to have that? He was a wonderful player.
Yeah, and I know you played against him.
Yeah,
and I got a quote from him where he said of you, he said, I'd heard about you, but I didn't realise how good you were. Well, I played against you, and I think
that's lovely.
Yeah, he man-marked you, didn't he?
I can't believe it. We played Feyenoord on the way to winning the UEFA Cup that year, and I think it was a young Ruud Gullit playing that game as well. I think he was 18. Anyway, whether it was to put us off or getting under our skin or whatever, I think they knew we were a better team than them, and it said that in the papers that Johan Cruyff was going to man-mark me, and I'm thinking, oh, that's a load of rubbish, that ain't going to happen. So I just turn up at the ground, and whistle goes and blow me down. We're in possession on the far side of the pitch, and Johan Cruyff standing next to me. I go and make a run. I thought, and he started following me. And I'm thinking, no, this can't be right. Jeff, I'm going, this can't be right. He's one of the greatest players the planet has ever seen. Why would I don't know if it was Johan's choice or the coach's choice. I mean, why would you do it? Anyway, I thought, right, okay then, let's show you what we got. And I had one of them games, we were 4-0 up by half-time. Every pass hit its buttons, and I've made 4 goals and created and it was just incredible, really. I don't know why they had that idea to do that. And strangely enough, the coach must have said, well, we'll release you off him at 4-0 at half-time. And Johan scored in the second half, and they got back in the game. It was 4-2 in the first leg. So it wasn't the best bit of coaching idea, whoever came up with that idea, really. but it inspired me, to be honest, to have somebody like that say they're going to man-mark you and then bloody well go out and do it. I thought, well, you know what? I take that as a massive, massive compliment. But I've got to show up here. I've got to prove that, there's a reason why that was been said. And it was probably one of my best games for Tottenham, yeah. But he was a wonderful player. I mean, his change of pace, the skill, when he did the skill, I remember me and my dad, I'm sitting on my sofa now as a kid, and when he did the Cruyff skill, we just looked at each other. And I said, what did he do there? And there was no replays as such. There was one replay on it. And then I went out in the garden afterwards. It was pitch black, and I'm doing this Cruyff turn in the pitch black as a kid. It was fantastic. And the Cruyff actually skill isn't too difficult, but it was the dummy. It was the actual body shape that he threw, that he was going to cross the ball. Everyone in the stadium thought it. Everyone at home watching thought he was going to cross the ball, and certainly the player who was up against him thought he was going to cross, because he went out for a chalk ice. And he just does this turn, and he's got 5 or 6 yards space, and he puts the ball in. And it was like, wow. It was a moment in time in football when you go, what did he do then? It was wonderful. It really was. What a player he was. Yeah. I had to make a decision, and I made that decision. tried to explain that when you're naming the squad, and I knew it was going to go on deaf ears, but it was Gazza. It was the saddest decision I've ever made, actually.
When you were a manager, Glenn, and obviously we look, promotion at Swindon, I think was FA Cup runner-up, wasn't it, at Chelsea, and League Cup runner-up at Spurs, and so on and so forth. There's a record. This is before, aside from international management, but at the clubs that you were at, then who were the really skillful, talented players that you admired in your squads when you were managers?
When I was manager?
Yeah.
Cool, dear. There's so many different answers I could give to that question, actually, Jeff, because I could simply say, I think one of the best, I'm asked that question, one of the best players I've coached was Paul Scholes. Scholes, he was different class. I loved him a bit. So he was such a good player, clever, playing 4 or 5 different positions. And play them at 9 out of 10. So
do you think he was appreciated in some ways more by people like yourself and managers, maybe when he was playing, maybe than the general public? They appreciate him now, but maybe not so much then.
Yeah, I saw things in him that I didn't see in other players, and he, as I say, he had other positions he could play. He was a very astute player, as well as his techniques and his passing. And his ability, you could play him as a manager. You could play him in people ask me, and I think Tiz was a fabulous footballer. I love watching Tiz, the goals. And they would say, why did you not play Tiz? My answer actually is Paul Scholes, because I had Paul Scholes that could play off the front. He could play as a second striker. He could play on the left-hand side of a 4 at times when we had to reshape the back 3, which I can't go into details, but he'd do it, and then he'd go off the front. He was clever enough. So that is the reason why he was such a good player, and he could play in so many different positions and give you so much. Could play in the end deep in the 4, in the centre of the pitch, and spray the ball about. He was a wonderful player, he really was, and I could see what he could give us as a manager, because I had that vision as a player, and I knew Tiz was a fabulous player, absolutely genius of a player, and he could only play in the one position really. That was the situation as it was. But Paul was a special player for me. He really was.
So England, well, let's talk about some of the players. Paul Ince. I remember, I think it was the game in Rome, wasn't it, where we'd had to go and get a point, and he's covered in blood. The shots him almost Terry Butcher-like.
I've got a great story on that, but I can't say it, Jeff.
Oh, come on!
No, I can't. It's for Q&As or something like that. But yeah, with him getting stitched and whatever, blah blah blah. But no, Ince was a wonderful player. He played in Italy. And we were going, into the Lions then. It was like Gladiator, 90,000 at Rome Stadium. And we had a very good team. And they had a very good team with Zola and Maldini. And they hadn't lost for a long time. But that was a titanic performance. It really was, from the players. They put in some performance there, because we were a team that were growing, and a lot of people respected that we kept the ball. I remember John Franco coming up after the game and saying, well, we beat them in the Tournoi the year before, and we beat them well. We totally outplayed them in Nantes, in that Le Tournoi, which was before the World Cup. And he came up and he said, wow, I've never seen an England team pass like that. And we really did. And so going into that game then a year later, we knew, we had to get the point. We had to get a point. So we knew the result was important, but the way we played as well, we went toe-to-toe with them, and we had the players and the characters and the experience to do it. And that was probably as good an England performance than you're going to get, actually. Certainly in my management, the Argentina with 10 men for so long was a titanic performance as well, to be honest. But that going into the Lions then, as I say, and having the character and the mentality to go there and be as strong as we did, and sometimes take the ball away from them. They couldn't get near the ball. So it was a really
I remember sitting watching that, Glenn, and the thing that struck me was this wasn't just gallant back to the wall Englishman, was it? It was nothing like that. It was playing them. I wouldn't say playing them off the park, but certainly deserving everything that we got.
Yeah, we set a system up which was good, and it allowed us to pass. That's why 3 at the back was always close to my heart, even from the Swindon days. Even going to England, I remember being at 53 caps, of which most of them games, when you're playing against top continental teams, the international level, we were so rigid in our 4-4-2, we were chasing the ball half the time. Then when we got the ball, our energy levels were low because we'd been chasing it, because they had 5 in midfield 9 times out of 10, whether it was wing backs or whether it was 5 and 1 up front, similar to how everyone plays now. But we were chasing shadows, and then when we had it, we had no options because we were too rigid in the way we played. And that's how we played in the 80s. What we achieved was a miracle, really, with what we had we should have been coached better, quite frankly. But that's how it was. And I thought, when I got that job, I didn't dream I'd ever be England manager. But as soon as I got it, I thought, there's no way I'm allowing my teams to play and get outnumbered. And that's why we played 3 at the back. It was offensive reasons, not defensive reasons. You have to know what you're doing defensively. Of course you do. But it was to have that 5 men across the midfield, to win the ball back and to play with and have options on the ball and keep our English 2 up front.
In midfield, obviously, you didn't pick Tiss for the 1998 World Cup. You know what's coming next, don't you? You didn't pick Paul Gascoigne either. How difficult a decision was that?
No, Gazza, I've gone on record in saying, and I went on record and depressed him. No one wanted to know what the truth is. Gazza only didn't go because of his injuries. Simple as that. He'd been carrying in 2 injuries, a knee and a calf, right the way through the season. He was up at Middlesbrough, and that's the thing as a manager of England, you're leasing the car. It's not yours. You're only leasing it every 10 days. For 10 days, you play a game and they go back. So you're not in control. And Gazza needed to be controlled with them injuries. Nothing to do with his play. He played in every game he was fit for me in the qualifiers. Why wouldn't I take him? Last game, he had to prove his fitness. And I left it to the last game, Morocco, and he got wiped out by the number 6. And I said, look, Gazza, just play 1-2 touch. Just get through the game. And he went on a little dribble. And he got wiped out and he had a hematoma. So he had the calf, the knee and a hematoma, which was going to be at least 3 weeks, I was told. So I had to make a decision. And I made that decision because it was injury that I couldn't take him. Simple as that. Tried to explain that and when you're naming the squad, and I knew it was going to go on deaf ears, but it was Gazza. But that was the reason. So it was the saddest decision I've ever made, actually. Not the toughest by any means, really. The toughest was letting youngsters go at Swindon that weren't going to be given contracts and then breaking down in your office. And I'd only been a manager 6 weeks. Yeah, Gazza's one was the saddest one I had to make. But no one wants to hear that. They were, we got a story here. This is Gazza, and I knew that was coming. And as an England manager, as I said, you can't listen to the noise outside. You can't let the noise affect you with your decisions. And there's only a handful of people that will understand that. Gareth's one at the moment, and there's others that have been England managers. But if you try and do that, you'll put yourself in a mental home if you're trying to keep everyone happy in that England job.
We talked about Rome and that performance, and you said the only one that maybe matched it was with the 10 men against Argentina in the World Cup. So, if I can just take you back to, can you remember what you were thinking on the touchline as David Beckham gets the red card?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you exactly what I was thinking. So when it happened, I saw it and I thought, oh, David, it was like a reaction that you would, what are you doing? And I'm thinking for myself, he might get booked here. I remember it. He might get a yellow here. Never dreamt in a million years he was going to get a red. It's not a red card. It's just simply not a red card. If you'd gone over the top of the ball or whatever, but, flippantly flicking the leg out and then making it into something, of course, that's what they would do at that level. But no, I'm standing there now. I can visualise myself there. I'm thinking we might get a yellow here. I was as shocked as anyone. When I see the red come out, I was like, oh, you are kidding me. It was one of them. It was an unjust decision. And let's face it was golden goal. I thought we'd gone through. When Sol scored the header, that was the most emotional scenario I've ever experienced in football. To celebrate, because some bright spark had said about golden goal back then, if you remember. That was a stupid rule, that was. But anyway, it was what it was. And we thought we'd done them. And it was a foul on Alan. Again, the referees did. It was a foul on Alan Shearer pushing, he said, not Sol. and we've got 5 players celebrating. We're all celebrating, think we've done the miracle. And suddenly I look over and they're running down the right wing and they're playing. And we've got 5 players in the corner flag celebrating. Can you imagine the roller coaster of emotions I went through? No wonder I had a cardiac arrest years later.
Yeah.
But no, and we cleared it. And so that performance really was spectacular. But I didn't dream David was going to get a red card. I thought it was a really poor refereeing decision.
Yeah.
I said that after.
And obviously the reaction against David in this country after when we look back at it, you know, a lot of people should be ashamed of themselves, really, shouldn't they? But you'll be aware of the Beckham documentary and the allegations that you sort of threw him under a bus. I mean, what's your reaction to that?
Well, I haven't seen it.
Nor have I.
And I probably won't see it because I know what went on. It was not like that at all. I think I was thrown a mic under me on the side of the pitch. And I think it was, if I remember right, I haven't seen the documentary, but I know I went to a press conference in France after the game and said exactly the opposite. I said, David cannot be made a scapegoat.
I've seen that press
conference. This is not right.
Yeah.
And, you know, I presume that's not on the doc.
I haven't seen it, but
you know, that's where I was coming. Whether going down to 10 men did it influence the result? Yeah, of course it might have done, because if you go down to 10 men, it's pretty obvious to anyone. A layman would tell you that. But no, so throwing him under the bus, no way.
Well, it's almost as if it's the opposite, isn't it? That you've been thrown under the bus, really. I remember that press conference where you specifically appealed for people, to people like him, not to be made a scapegoat.
Absolutely. My daughters have seen it and they sent that to me. And I said, look, I'm not going to try and, you know, what happened to me 5 years ago? These things don't matter anymore. They don't matter to me. You know, life's too precious to. I hope David's, you know, film goes really well. I'm sure it will. He was a wonderful player for me, a fabulous player, one of the best England's had. And by all accounts, my Zoe said, "Yeah, but Dad, his mum." I said, "Oh dear, his mum. Of course, his mum's going to defend him. Imagine her nan. My mum was fierce as any. If anyone said anything against me when I was a player, oh my word." So. Absolutely, no problem. My mother would have been exactly
If you bumped into him now, would you be okay with him?
Yeah, of course so. I've got no reason not to be. I mean, people forget things and it's slightly different. But if that's how David perceives it or his family perceives it, I can't stop that. But I actually went out and did the opposite way. I remember phoning him afterwards and asking if he wanted help. And I got people that, he said, no, I'm okay. The club's helping me, blah, blah, blah. Maybe he's forgotten that. I don't know. But I remember that distinctly. So... It was a dreadful time for him, and he showed such character, not about his abilities, but to come through that and show the character that he showed, and the mentality to come through it, and then see the rest of his England career was magnificent from the lad. It really was, because that is the test of a character of all tests, really. To you know how people reacted, but. Throwing him under the bus? No way. I actually protected him in more ways than he probably knows, actually.
I do hope you're enjoying the show. I just want to tell you that you can follow us at Football's Greatest Pod on Instagram, TikTok and Facebook. And search for Football's Greatest Pod to find us on X. To bring you back to the modern day, you know, we talked about some of the players that you had at your disposal as England manager. European Championships coming up and then a World Cup, and England have got, you know, Jude Bellingham and Declan Rice and James Maddison and Jack Grealish, you know, and Harry Kane still in, the peak of his form. Is this a squad that you would expect to win a European Championships or to win a World Cup under Gareth? Can you expect? Is probably the wrong word.
Yeah, listen, it's a tough one. They've got the players. They've got the offensive players as well. It's not because of defensive reasons. Some squads you go and you look at, you go, oh, they're going to be hard to beat. The Italians, if you like, over the years gone by. But we've got front foot football. We've got all them players you mentioned there. Great offensive players. And I think Gareth's done a wonderful job. He's taken us up levels from where they were. And we've got a group of players that are capable of winning the Euros. We've got a group of players that are capable of winning a World Cup. At this level now, at World Cup level in Europe, it's not that easy. It's not as easy as that because you got the best squad. I think that we're the best, probably got the best squad in the world, actually. with the envy of other countries, where we've always had an envy about the Dutch at some stage who didn't do what they should have done over the years with the talent they had, and France when they've controlled it, and Spain and blah blah blah. I think we're in that seat at the moment. I really do.
Declan Rice. What do you make of Declan?
Terrific player. Every team needs a Declan Rice. They might not need a certain other player, if you like, but every team needs a Declan Rice, because he's got that ability now to receive the ball, play in a deeper position, make a team tick, a little bit like Rodri does for City. So important for City. I think Declan is showing that he's got a lot of ability. He's going to get better and better in that position. I think there's a little bit more for him, but I think for England he's going to have to play. If you've got Bellingham, if you've got a Foden and a Maddison, you've got to have a balance in that midfield, and he's a great balancer offer, as well as somebody now who actually for Arsenal is going to get more up the pitch. But for me, playing for England, he's the perfect balancing off player to have everyone around him, but he can use the ball. He can see forward passes. That player needs to have good vision, and Declan's got that. He's now putting in, if there's space in front of him, he now drives with the ball as well at times, certainly at club level. Whether he would have to do that in England, maybe it will happen, and it has to happen. But no, he's an all-round midfield player that every team needs.
Yeah. And as a Spurs man, you must be delighted at the impact that James Maddison's made.
Yes, yeah. Listen, I said about Maddison 3 years ago, I wished he'd gone to Tottenham then and played with Harry Kane, to be honest. But for me, he was ahead of him and Foden. For me, Foden's a great player, but I'd have had him in there a lot earlier, ahead of Mount. He's a better player than a lot of the players that have been given more chances. He's a 10. He's a real 10 that can open teams up. He's got ability to score goals. He's got ability to create goals. He understands the game. He's going into his peak. So defensively, he knows what the team need from him. So at the moment, I think he's ripe, and he's got that little bit of difference, that ability to change a game. What he hasn't got in an England shirt yet is, I don't think he's got quite the approval yet. When he gets the approval, like he has at Tottenham, when he does get that, he'll
approval from the fans or the management.
Management. Yeah, he doesn't feel. I can tell you now, because I had the same problem. He doesn't feel quite at home yet. He feels as if he's still proving every game. And for a number 10, you can do that at a fullback or a centre back. You can get away with that. But when you're a number 10, you've got to be creative. That's the toughest thing. If you think, I've still got to prove myself, that's when it's tougher. It adds on loads of chains on your shoulders. So it actually represses you from playing. But when he's playing free with the freedom, and he's not ever thinking, I wonder if I play this, I've got to play this well to play in the next game. If you take that off him, then you'll see the very best of him. And I think he's top notch. I really do.
Look, Glenn, just to finish off, I want to do a quick fire greatest with you, okay? So I'm going to ask you to name 10 great people or moments from your own career.
Right, okay.
So here we go. Your greatest manager or coach?
I've got to say Arsene.
Okay.
I think Arsene Wenger, for me, he was ahead. He was ahead, and I think they were in France and abroad, to be honest, on so many different angles of. It made you think that you were complete. Football was about mind, the body, looking after yourself, the warm downs, the stretching.
He changed everything,
everything.
Didn't he? Yeah.
He changed it here, but it was the same. I had a taste of that before over there. So when he went to Arsenal, I knew what was going to happen, and I thought, I looked at a few of the players and I thought, well, good luck with that one, Arsene. but they listened and learned, and then they went on and done what they did. So fair dues to them players. So Arsene was excellent. Yeah.
So some tough ones here, I'm guessing. Your greatest teammate?
Oh, it's got to be Ossie, I think.
Ossie. Greatest opponent?
Oh, Maradona.
Okay.
Maradona, without his hand.
Your greatest goal, Glenn?
I can't split. I get asked that a lot, and I can't split the 2 goals, the volley at Manchester United at White Hart Lane, which was just off the cuff, and Ossie played it a little bit back to me high, so it made it look more spectacular. And I had to jump, and I'm in the air, and a volley across Gary Back, and then the chip at Watford. The chip at Watford come from nowhere, really. I weren't playing particularly well that day, got to say. I was having a bit of a shocker, but it just came from nowhere, that goal. Yeah.
It was a wonderful goal, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, your greatest match?
I think it's got to be... There's 2, actually. The replay in the FA Cup in '81, I look back on that, watched that one day years ago, and I thought, wow, okay, that's probably one of my better. And the Feyenoord game against Cruyff, yeah.
Your greatest mate in football?
I was very close with Rixie, Graham Rix, when we were 18, and I hadn't seen him so much. He was at my academy with me. Great coach, by the way, fabulous coach. So Graham was growing up, although we were at Tottenham Arsenal and on the pitch we'd kick lumps out of each other, but Graham was a good friend of mine. Johnny Gorman, obviously my assistant, and at different clubs in England, and yeah, I think you can ask me about Paul Miller, but he was my roommate.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we're going to get to him then. Well, let's do him next. Your greatest roommate,
Yeah,
Paul Miller.
Maxie Miller. We had apprentices together and spent a lot of time with Paul. Yeah, Maxie, he's a character, great character. Made a good cup of tea as well.
Your greatest rollicking, which I guess is one you could have either given out or received.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, what that technical area does to you as a manager, it's incredible. Rollicking, I'm trying to think back. Well, I don't know about... Yeah, there's been some rollickings. I think we had a bad one when we lost 7-0 at Anfield. I remember on the Monday, that was not a nice day. But I'm going to surprise you now, because the players that I had at Arsenal players of England used to say, and with Ian Wright and Lee Dixon, and with working on TV with them, they couldn't believe that Arsene, when he was younger at Monaco, oh my word, there was a few times when things were thrown up against the wall, and fortunately for me, Jeff, at the time, it was all said in French, and I didn't understand it. So. But he actually used to lose it, whereas the Arsenal lads couldn't believe at half time. Sometimes he'd say nothing, and I go, "Wow, that's not the Arsene that I knew." Yeah. So just as a surprise element, Arsene could lose it a little bit.
He comes over as very sort of urbane and mild mannered, doesn't he? But hey,
exactly. But when you're younger, I suppose he's experienced when he come to Arsenal.
Your greatest regret, Glenn?
Well, this one's going to be a bit different. You're not going to. You know what? I had a lot of belief in myself and my ability, but my greatest regret is fear. I think as a youngster, when you're coming through, having too much fear. As you grow older, you realise that there's things back there you used to worry about and think about that really didn't matter, and you'd have played better, or you'd have done things better in your life, not just football. Fear is debilitating. And I'd say to any youngster, like I was talking about earlier, these are the things that you have to get out of the way of fear. Fear debilitates you. So if a regret would be someone teaching me a little techniques or whatever to eradicate fear in your life, you'd perform better without a shadow of doubt.
And finally, your greatest moment?
That is a very, very simple one. After collapsing at the BT studios, waking up in that hospital and then finding out what had happened, and I was out of it, and then, wow, that was my greatest moment, because it's given me extra time. It really has.
Well, thank goodness for that. And Glenn, thanks for joining us to discuss football's greatest midfielders, of which you are beyond question one. No doubt about that. Thanks very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And we've reached the end of football's greatest. My thanks to Glenn Hoddle for joining us today. Next time on football's greatest.
My thought then was the crowd were aware that we were there ready to come out, and it was so noisy. I just felt that the whole country was in the stadium, not just the 95,000. And the backdraft of the noise coming back the tunnel was really something I would just never forget.
If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode of Football's Greatest. And if you're listening to us on your favourite podcast platform, please press follow so you get us in your feed every single week. Thanks for joining us. Football's Greatest is a folding pocket production with BBC Studios.